Hello, welcome to my second episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this video, I'd like to discuss certain things, especially one thing that is really important to me is where we're heading from here, from this experience. It seems that the future is spanning in all directions, and there's a kind of a contest as to where we should be going into the future. And I'll try to explicit what my idea is and why I think what I think. I'm also going to look at a few videos and comment on them so you understand where I'm coming from. So the first thing I want to touch upon is this notion that when you're trying to explore source, God, or infinity, or the universe in general, you can try to take different perspectives. You can look at it as going from zero or nothing to infinity. Of course, both are the same thing, but regardless, you can tell the story from the perspective of starting from zero and going to infinity, or starting from infinity and going to zero, to nothingness. And depending on your choice in which of these two you choose, the kind of story you'll be telling is absolutely different. In this story, you have the Big Bang and sort of how things spawn spontaneously out of nothing. And you have linear time. You have linear time in here. From this perspective, you have directly no time, and you have all the spiritual vocabulary that we tend to use, like the spirit realm that created everything else, and then they sort of incarnated one from 12 dimensions all the way down to the third, so to speak. And it doesn't really matter which is true, because both are true in a sense, but what's important is the kind of vocabulary you use is kind of already a frame and a model for where you want to go next. So when we ask the question of where to go next, the story that you tell yourself of how you got to where you are is going to greatly determine where you're headed. And in infinity, actually, heading towards the spirit realm and so-called higher dimensions, and this is really an interesting paradox. If we're headed there, then understand that if you take the perspective from infinity to zero, those already exist. Well, everything technically already exists, but those have already been experimented, so to speak, because they're talking to us right now. So it's almost as if you were going back into the past from a certain point of view. You return back to who you were, and you just remember who you were. And many spiritual teachers talk about this, the fact that ultimately we're just remembering. We're just remembering who we already are. Who we already are. But I have a problem with this. I mean, how is this interesting? How is this really interesting from the point of view of infinity, which wants to know itself? To me, it's more like infinity is now disappointed because it's almost as if infinity was indeed this person sitting in the movie theater, having an awesome time looking at what the actors are going to come with and explore in the movie, because infinity cannot see or experiment itself unless it sort of limits itself and incarnates. And then these bloody actors, they figured out that they're actually an extension of infinity and decided to sort of, stop playing the movie and sort of get out of the movie and try to take also a seat inside the theater and become more and more to the image of infinity, expanding their consciousness further and further until they reach infinity. And infinity is like, well, crap. I mean, who's going to entertain me now? Who's going to explore infinity now if these actors have decided to join me in the theater and stop sort of acting and thinking that all of this is real? So to the question, where are we headed now? Where to go next? The real question that I'm trying to ask is, should we wake up from a dream, or should we dream deeper still? I'll just first give you, for instance, an example of, because one of my viewers has commented on a channel which I watch actually, of Jessica Del Mar, and just wanted to comment on a few things that she shares. If you look at this graph, for instance, this is a very good illustration of what it looks like when you take the point of view of starting from infinity at a source and then basically making your model and your structure based on the point of view of starting from infinity and then going all the way to us. And that has a certain number of implications in how you see things, because the temptation is to go back and sort of, raise your consciousness to become a galaxy, to become, whatever, the central sun, and just work your way back upwards towards the source. But here, she rightfully puts manifestation can't continue. Well, can they? Because if you listen to many spiritual teachers, now it seems that we're on the way back up there. And I think this is actually where all the fun resides, both from the point of view of source and even maybe from our point of view, and I'll dig into that later. And so I do watch her channel, but I find that her approach of, telling the story from the point of infinity to zero is a little bit limiting in what she can share and the messages she receives. But here's a nice synchronicity that I got from her. It was really interesting. Here in this video, which I really encourage you to watch, Arcturian message, We Are You, basically they explain that Gaia volunteered to be the seed of the entire universe, where life is created on her. This is one of the only videos, by the way, where she looks at it from the point of view of going from zero to infinity, because indeed, if you start from nothing and then you sort of create, there's life appearing on this planet in the third dimension, then that life can then spread to the entire universe and create all of the other races in higher dimensions, which is what I mentioned in my videos, except that it works the other way around as well, which is all of these races created us in the past, which will create them in the future. It's all a loop, because in infinity, once you really get the big picture, everything causes everything else again. So I do like her channel. I just find that sometimes it's too a little bit too woo-woo and abstract, especially when she goes into the energies and all this stuff. And I like I've said before, it's like commenting on each second what happens as a baby is being born. I just like to say the baby is being born and then move on to, okay, but what do we do once we're born, and where are we heading, and exploring things that are a little more, well, the big picture. I've always been fascinated by the big picture and structuring the big picture, as opposed to very down-to-earth things, and I guess maybe that's strength, maybe that's a weakness. We'll see as we try to answer this question. Should we dream deeper? So the first question is, many spiritual teachers say that it's the first time, this is very interesting, that a collective, that people try to ascend as a collective, keeping their physical bodies. You'll hear many spiritual teachers saying that this is a first in the universe. That other races didn't do this, kind of. They didn't ascend as a collective, and they didn't keep their physical bodies, and we have this progressive ascension process where our physical bodies are modified. Why? What for? Why keep the old paradigm and take it into the new? And I think this is kind of already a hint as to the answer to these questions and what we see emerging in our reality, because we see emerging virtual reality, augmented reality, and even quantum computing, more and more realistic virtual environments, and we're afraid that people are going to lose their time and get lost in just playing video games inside virtual environments and stop, living their lives in the quote-unquote real world. But now take the point of view of infinity. And here, I'll actually show you an extract from a video from Bashar's channeling, or Bashar saying a few things about the laws of the universe. And I think what's most exhilarating for infinity is to be able to transcend whatever laws apply to it. And here, I think we're on the verge, and the reason why we're ascending and what's unique and whatever is that we're on the verge of getting rid of or transcending one of these laws. Listen carefully.
Time, as we understand it, is an illusion. Reality is reality and an illusion. At a minimum, it's flexible.
Yes.
What isn't an illusion?
What Bashar calls the laws, the 5 laws. You exist. There's nothing you can do to change that. Everything is here and now. There's nothing you can do to change that. The one is the all are the one. Can't change that. What you put out is what you get back. You can't change that. Everything changes, except the laws.
Now that's interesting, because law number 4 is what you put out is what you get back. It's kind of a physical mechanism in the world that we've incarnated in, and the rules that are within infinity. But I'm wondering if this VR, AR, and quantum computing taken together, and also, understanding consciousness at a deeper level and how it functions, isn't a way to transcend this law. How so? Well, just imagine that we find the technology that basically we, as a collective, we do transcend biology, so to speak, but we still keep the biological elements of our bodies. And we understand how consciousness works, how the brain basically inside the head tunes into consciousness and modulates consciousness to be able to see parts of infinity. So basically how the brain acts as a kind of a sensor to tune in to parts of infinity and not other parts of infinity. And we understand how all of this process works. Well, imagine that we do create a matrix like in the movie Matrix, where we plug in people into a virtual reality. Well, I'm wondering if it's not so much machines that would capture us to keep us in a trap and harness our energy, than us willingly plugging into this matrix. Why? To be able to make even more infinite, to explore even more the possibilities that exist within infinity without breaking the rest of infinity. Because you see, the issue with infinity is that it's unconditional love, yes, certainly. It's unconditional love. But inside infinity, there is all the stuff that we don't like, all the quote-unquote evil stuff, all the parts where infinity hurts itself, so to speak. And the spiritual teachers always say that now it's all about love, it's all about peace and whatever. But what about that other part of infinity where you still have dualities and all that stuff? How does it continue exploring itself? Or is that part of infinity never going to be explored? And from the point of view of infinity, that is a waste. I would love to know what it feels like to explore that. But how can it do that without actually hurting the people? Because it loves everything and it doesn't want anything to suffer and feel pain and whatever. So how about it creates this virtual environment where you yourself configure that environment to experience whatever you want to experience. For instance, we harness the power. We harness the advantages of having a biology, linear time, and memories with our physical bodies to rewrite the past, and start experiencing in VR from that fictitious past in a fully 100% virtual environment where anything you interact with is just AI, artificial intelligence. And so imagine, for instance, someone that is, and you could even use this not only for experimentation, but also for rehabilitation of people that are, for instance, mass murderers. How do you do that? For instance, imagine that whatever soul incarnated wanted to experience what it is to be a mass murderer. And of course, our society's like, well, that's a no-go. If you listen to the channelings of Bashar, he also says that, if you don't learn something in this life, no problem. You can just incarnate in another place somewhere else and live that experience there. But how can you make that experience in a society which is now spiritually awakened and everything? It's probably incompatible. You'd have to go to another part of the universe where people are still backwards and people have still not woken up to the reality of infinity, unconditional love, and all the other things. But just imagine if you'd plug that person into this kind of device and you would rewrite parts of his past at least, in order for this whatever scenario that you created in VR to start at that point. Like, for instance, there's a logical. Well, first of all, this technology does not exist. You erase it from his mind, so he doesn't know that he's in a simulation, and then you sort of you put key past elements, fake past elements into his brain, fake past memories, which explain why, for instance, he's on a boat heading to an island with a bunch of people, and these people are actually just AIs, and he's going to end up killing all of them, but then he's going to end up alone on that island, and as he's alone, he understands via that process that, oh, yes, it was exhilarating to kill all of these people, because that is kind of what he wanted to experience, but then loneliness or being alone drives him nuts to the point where he would love to finally be in company with other humans and he starts understanding and appreciating the value of interacting with humans and of human life and respecting human life, and seeing how easy it is to kill someone, and the short-term gain of having the exhilarating effect of killing people, but the benefit of respecting life and be able to interact with people and be social, because of course we're human beings, we're meant to be social. And so you could use it as a rehab kind of tool. There are even more perverse things that you could say which are in line with this fourth law, but in a much more perverted sense. It's that, for instance, imagine a rapist, a serial rapist. You plug that person into this machine, do the same thing, erase his memories, erase the existence of this machine, and put him in the situation where is about to rape someone, but it's going to be AI, of course. But then what you can do is after that, you simulate an experience where he is plugged into the machine inside the simulation, and they tell him, in this machine, you're going to feel whatever your victim has felt. And you're going to experience rape from the other perspective. And so it's almost like an accelerated version of what we call karma. Like paying for past actions, which is not really paying, it's just looking at the other side of the coin, at the other side of the experience. But here you do it instantly. And it would be in the same lifetime, the same person. And so he'd get to experience exactly what it feels like to be a victim as opposed to a perpetrator. And that could also change many things. Feeling everything, feeling the humiliation, the shame, where the perpetrator gets his kicks out of all of that. And now he gets to experience the exact opposite. Everything that person experiences, he experiences directly after. But these are I'm just brainstorming here, of course, but it's a real important question, I find, to answer. If what infinity really would want from us is, we know who you are, and let's go, get closer to you. I'm wondering if wherever we go from here is getting closer to infinity regardless, because, how should I say this? If infinity is really infinite, then regardless of the directions you take inside infinity, you're still inside infinity. You cannot get out of infinity. You cannot get closer to infinity, because infinity is already here. It's already everywhere. And there is no sort of set destination to get closer, quote unquote, or to ascend or whatever. I think one experience you can do inside infinity is to expand your consciousness continuously to be more and more like infinity, and that's one possibility. And the other possibility, though, is to delve always deeper and dream always deeper into a deeper and deeper state, and to experience more and more and more things. And you can see that even, what allows for more freedom? That is also an essential question. If you go into the higher dimensions, the reason why we didn't have access to higher dimensions is that you do one thing there and you directly get the blowback. You directly experience the consequence of your actions, and it reverberates across so many different timelines and everything. You have so much influence that you'd better be attuned to unconditional love and all of that stuff. You'd better understand this all is one and one is all and all of that stuff, in order to behave responsibly, because otherwise the blowback is going to be huge. And so you read some articles and spiritual teachers which say that there are certain powerful beings like of the 12th dimension, which just by thinking, just by having a thought, they could destroy your entire reality. They could just completely blow Earth up, just with a thought. They're never going to do that, of course, but they could in terms of the power that they have over reality, being in that higher state of a higher dimensional state. So I'm really puzzled as to where we're headed next. I think it's going to be both, actually, and we're not going to have to pick. I think what would be nice is that we grow spiritually still. But the technology we develop, the sort of manifestations on the outside, is something that allows us also to dream deeper and explore infinity even more. Because if you go into the higher dimensions, you cannot build a virtual world for yourself where you can still experience duality. You can't. But in VR you can, where everything else is virtual and is inside a machine, and you're the only one doing the experience, and all of the rest is just ones and zeros inside a computer. And there you can do whatever the hell of experience you want to have. And so I don't know if you found this interesting, and I'd be happy to hear any of your comments and thoughts about this, because ultimately I think this is the way that you can go deeper into infinity rather than go back. One final thing I wanted to comment on is how to act as someone that has spiritually grown. All of these spiritual teachers act in a certain way. If you look at gurus, much of it almost sounds like posturing, and you have to act in a certain way and be enlightened and whatever. But I'm wondering if for some of them it is the same as if a chimp was picking up rocks and pretending they're smartphones, like putting them to their ear and talking to a fictitious person that doesn't exist. And the reason I'm saying this is that I'm wondering if having this insight of no time and all of the possible futures for humanity, and having access to that, doesn't break your linear experience of it and gradual transition, and you can connect to your future self, be that future self now, but it makes you look really, really crazy. So instead of the chimp using this tool of connecting to his future self responsibly, because Bashar talks about that, getting insights and tips from your future self as to who you could be. That is, you pick up the rock and you try to make fire, which is something that is going to incrementally, or in this linear construct, be logical, or you're going to pull something from your future that makes sense in your now, in this linear construct. You can match being you in the future, but still being stuck in the present bubble and interacting with the present people. And so what you appear to be is crazy. And I think there are many psychiatric hospitals filled with these people that are talking about, that they're somewhere else on a different planet or whatever. And I think that's what they've done as an experience, is that they've sort of identified with the future, or not really the future, but one specific them in infinity, in infinite potentials, which might be the future in our linear construct or the past, it doesn't really matter. And they've identified so much with that person that they cannot, they're out of alignment with the collective experience we're living. And that's totally fine. I mean, it's an experience you can have, to be someone else inside a collective reality and manifestation, which is what it is today. It's like, for the moment, it's mainstream science and a little bit of spirituality, which is blossoming. And you can be someone that is totally disconnected from all of it, like completely sever your ties with mainstream science, and then only talk in these esoteric terms and throw everything else into the garbage. But then I'm wondering if it's not the same kind of thing as this chimp that pretends he's typing on a computer that doesn't exist yet. I mean, his fellow chimps are going to deem him just to be completely crazy. And so I'm wondering if it's not wiser to use this tool of looking into the future to bring into your present a future which represents incremental change, which is relevant and still it doesn't disconnect you from the linear experience we're having right now. I hope this brainstorm was interesting for you. I still haven't figured out the answer to many of these questions, as you see. It's just thoughts that I have about where to go next. What source would really want for us? Well, it doesn't really want anything, but infinity, I think, is thrilled in experiencing itself and not in. I think that's the dreaming deeper part is where you would still reach infinity, but in a more interesting way than working your way back upwards, but rather continuing on the spiral and where we're heading, with that new deeper understanding of what we are, why are we here, and all that stuff.